Apparently this is Deterioration, webisode 6.
Episode 6. We're talking more about the end of Christian monotheism in particular.
He means the death of God. The death of God. We're killing God, y'all. That's all you need to know. You don't get much better than that for a catch line. Killing God. Okay.
Art and philosophy, or concepts of philosophy, presented in an artistic fashion, along with some satire of status quo babble. It's pretty much what this is. Fernando, do it again. Do it again.
No.
Come on.
Oh, you pay me $100.
You do pole dancing. Where's the pole dancing? Do some more.
It's good, yeah, it's good.
Go again. Go.
No. You pay me
What the fuck's going on here?
Realizing that for leaving and getting fired from Capital Chemist, and wanting to develop further one's interest in philosophy and art, is met with a death threat, robbery, and 5 years of forced death threat, robbery, and 5 years of forced antipsychotics that almost kill you, with all their side effects, is now what I am recovering from. I genuinely do consider Roger Toll to be the most disgraceful human being I've ever encountered, present in the entire country. My November resolution is that associates who approach me implying a friendship and fixate without asking questions on 1989, I might now sue. You've no idea. Those of you in the religious right have no idea what damage your fucking gay prayers have done. And those of you in the pharmacy have no idea what your violations of federal government human rights have done. Not letting you win won't satisfy me. I'll teach you about loss.
If science in its endeavors fails to detect God, so what? Thoughtful Christians don't believe that God is a natural phenomenon or a law of nature to be squared on the internet.
As Roger Toll professes to take art so seriously, why don't you go and ask him about his favorite band, Boston, and what's on all their album covers. Just go and look it up for yourself. Look at the artwork on all the covers of all the Boston albums and ask Mr. Military Biphobe Roger Toll how he conducts his abysmal research. since he takes art so seriously.
Or what I think should be rational is, do they
Just
have
Google it. Google
has ever happened?
Boston album covers and look at all the covers.
A deep fallacy, and the fact that it remains a fallacy shows that what is being called science is actually hiding behind a philosophical principle. It was the philosopher Hume who pointed out 200 years ago.
He is
that
getting
from no
quite
amount of empirical
retarded in his old age.
however large, can you draw a general law that is true as a matter of logic? What I mean is,
I think he'd be good friends with Cardinal Pell. They can
the speed at which this pen falls
they
down.
can conceal abuse cases together.
A million times. But you don't know that on
Play
a
with little
star
kids.
10 light years away, or in some other condition where you haven't measured it, that if you drop this pen, it will fall at the same speed.
I have impunity.
Science presumes it. It doesn't prove it. Hang on, let me finish. Right, but you can't measure it always and every
Your last invitation for a one-on-one fist fight
No, you're assuming that
is here, Roger.
so it happened at the same speed, and your measurement is based on that. So Hume's point is this.
Either way, we're in a conflict of interest. I want all my superannuation
But he said we should always
immediately,
experience that proves the opposite.
as I'm going to need them for, amongst other things, my lawsuit.
Right, so,
Lawsuit.
the popular thing is Skeptic Magazine is citing
Plural.
people that can telekinetically move objects with their mind or so on. And there's an example of this where there's a man who can move the cursor on his computer just by thinking about it. Now, it turns out he's a quadriplegic and he has a
When you're a kid growing up making lots of prank phone calls, then as an adult you can wind up with a bit of a sixth sense for when uninvited people are fiddling with your phone. This is what this rather morbidly obese skank employer decided to bundle together in 2009 the Bible and the schedule of pharmaceutical benefits. It's like the full frontal satire of substances that actually work, spun into little parody pills or injections, and the rebate jacked up to fuck tons of money per month. Not much of a recognition of what substances nature kindly co-evolved with our species. This is a rectinol notepad. I would say ask this military pharmacist Tanya Osborne about her aptitude with rectinol. Rectinol HC. Yeah, she'd probably be the expert at applying it kind of forcefully and without asking first. Yeah. Fingers in orifices and all kinds of new things without asking. See, Tanya, I was born for Rectinol HC. That cunt's a pain in my ass. Not a misogynist, but yeah.
People believe as a fact.
By
1950, the tradition.
Unfortunate thing for my adversary who's prone to issuing death threats, my former employer Roger Toll. I've already comprehended his future. He behind his wife Maxine's back, he goes to a hotel with Cardinal George Pell, and they 69 for a while. His wife's selling books at Kingston Paper Chain Bookstore, which is actually a shop I'd recommend to anyone who's interested in literature. But anyway, Roger Toll's he's in this hotel with Cardinal George Pell, and they're sucking each other's cocks and reminiscing on the yonder days of fucking kids.
Then the power of the church through tradition, authority, and revelation.
Ask Roger's kids to tell you if you know, he harasses other people's families, and privacy and things like that. That's right, he doesn't have any.
Imams issuing fatwas. It's the same principle. It's issued by the authority and then passes down.
Can see a rainbow, see a rainbow, see a rainbow, fuck the police state too. I haven't read yet the dictionary definition of the word hiatus, but you know, I recently compiled an ensemble of non-theistic literature, which I called Our Living Jesus, which is not to imply I compete against him. I was having I've just returned home from dinner with my neighbor Matthew, and we were talking about I shared with him my viewpoint that this doctrine that Jesus Christ constitutes a savior for mankind is it's offensive on too many levels to count. You know, we talked about get your Bibles yourselves. I'm enjoying pissing on one particular Bible, burning another Bible, and I'm just trying to think of other things I could do to other Bibles and other copies of Bibles. Actually, if any of you have any spare Bibles that you no longer want, you know, I'm trying to look for ways to unblock this right sphenoid sinus mucus retention cyst. And the destruction of Bibles definitely helps. But I was talking with my neighbor Matthew about how if you study the transcript of Jesus' trial in Mark, it looks like, you know, an unconsensual murder by the King Queen's Guard, in which Jesus never once states that he considers himself the Son of God or the King of the Jews. And then, 10 and 15 years later, Matthew and Luke are written, and the story's rewritten and reportrayed, and it's not a murder from the King and Queen's Guard anymore. It's a willful human sacrifice. And then you've got the Gospel of John, and I don't want to be accused of sharing my former employer's secrets to keep citizens in Canberra safe from prejudicial mistreatment from the police state, but that verse in John's Gospel, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, and the idea that Jesus died for the sins of the world, and that you ought to follow him, give your life to him, and follow him. If you're following a person who died for the sins of the world, well, I'm starting to lose my care factor because of the way I've been treated. So I'm prepared to come out and say at this point that if you're a citizen who thinks this, that you're following a person who died for the sins of the world, then you're very much prone to coercive language. You're pretty much saying, yeah, I'll take the fall for anything you suggest. And that's probably why the police state would like you to give your life to Jesus Christ. So yeah, my studies of the four Gospels, which I have studied quite thoroughly, is that at worst we can say from the transcript in Mark chapter 12 that Jesus never even perceived the question, "Are you the King of the Jews?" He never even perceived it as a question. He says, and you can look it up in chapter 12, he says, "Well, you said it," not, "Well, you asked me." So what does that imply about Jesus of Nazareth as a human? If he, the King's Guard just confronts him and says, "Are you the King of the Jews?" And Jesus goes, "Well, you said it." I mean, Jesus' response isn't even grammatically correct. What would have been correct would have been for him to say, "Well, yes, you've asked me, and no, I'm not the King of the Jews. I'm just Jesus of Nazareth." This is why I'm inclined to wonder if he was a first-century bisexual male, because there was no word for a bisexual in the New Testament and during that time in history. I see traces of it resonating in the later Gospels, even in the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verse 1. It's said to have been written in 95 AD, and they're still spinning the story on about how he was a willful human sacrifice. And they're saying, in the beginning the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and then the Word became flesh. And even just the quotes of Justin Martyr, if you look them up as well, it just shows that the Bronze Age was a rancid, biphobic slaughterhouse, more or less. And yeah, that's why I've noticed, and I've just seen traces of it, elements of it, and shadows of it in private sector companies that are, as an old friend of mine would say, in cahoots with the monarchy. As I've already said in my last video piece, I love Princess Diana. Does that mean they technically can't call me an anti-monarchist or an enemy of the state? I mean, still the most, to this day, the most attack-like movement I've made had been the throwing of eggs at a rooftop while before adulthood. Not a rooftop. It was the letterbox, the walls. It was a former stepfather. It was somewhat violent. Violent at home, reading the Bible at church. So once the divorce had happened, I arranged for a house egging. I even gave a presentation about why house eggings can be justified at Lake Tuggeranong College. But what I think, is going on is that, just the suggestion that Jesus Christ saves or is a savior, and that you must follow him, give your life to him, is, to my best estimation, a political death trap in many respects. I mean, even if you were to incorporate psychological terms into your assessment of Jesus as a person helping people in the Gospel of Mark, and then he's confronted and he's asked, "Are you the King of the Jews?" He doesn't even comprehend the question. He goes, "Well, you said it." That means he didn't comprehend, "Well, you've asked me." If Jesus comprehended the question, "Are you the King of the Jews?" correctly, he would have said, "Well, you've asked me. No, I'm not the King of the Jews. I'm just Jesus of Nazareth," is what he would have said. But he was, so he must have been in such a state of, he must have been disturbed or shocked or traumatized by the mere question. And he goes, "Well, you said it." So he misconstrued a question as a statement. And then he gets told to march up the hill carrying his cross. And I can only comprehend him being in a suicidal mind state as he's carrying his cross up that hill. That's the best. It's the best interpretation I can get out of that gospel, because he devoted his efforts to helping his community. What sort of person who wants to work to help their community is going to then go, "Oh yeah, sure. Can I carry my own cross up a hill so you can fucking nail metal through my body to a wooden cross?" Surely he would have been thinking, "I want to come up with more new and innovative ways to help my community." So I think his confrontation from the King's Guard and Queenie, who says nothing, which to me is a reflection of why, conversely, Queen Elizabeth has no partner to this day. Confusing being self-sacrificial with suicide is reprehensible to my mind, whether you consider yourself a healthcare professional or a law enforcer or a lawyer or a politician or any form of humanist or humanitarian. It's just disgraceful to me. And then you can see Matthew and Luke being rewritten in 80 to 85 AD, and they've changed the whole story. In Matthew's gospel, Jesus is he's giving his life, he's sacrificing himself. In Luke, he's sacrificing himself. In Matthew, at the time of it's either at the time of the crucifixion or the resurrection, but the graves of saints from the Old Testament are said to have opened up, and they all come back to life. All all the dead people from the Old Testament come back to life and start to reacquaint themselves with their former loved ones and relatives. And then, then in John, it's as if Jesus has been appointed to fulfill some sort of fucking mission for God. So you compound these four Gospels together, and you've got the King and Queen's Guard causing, I guess coercion is the right word, because, as I said, Jesus confused a question with a statement. So you've got them doing that, then the crucifixion, and then they retell the story in Luke and Matthew so that it's supposed to be the case that he sacrificed himself for you. And then in John, it's God sending him like a military officer dispatching troops. But with 10 years between Mark and Matthew and Luke, and another 10 years between Matthew and Luke and John, all I can really envision when I try to think about how these manuscripts came to be is that scribes and scholars at the time were just fascinated with the case of what Jesus of Nazareth stood for and what he was about. But because Pontius Pilate and the Roman representatives exclaimed that they found no guilt in him, and because he was asked, "Are you the king of the Jews?" it could only have been the ancient monarchy, the king's guard, and the queen to King Herod, who is conveniently never mentioned at all in the New Testament. And that's my personal prediction. Queen Elizabeth II, to this day, she's not desired to be the intimate company of any male in the United Kingdom, because she keeps promoting Bronze Age murder to the populace as a means to save their eternal souls. Now, if you want to look into some of the principles of psychiatry and psychology, you might find it interesting to consider that if you look up ancient Greek, the word soul, if you get an exhaustive concordance, a biblical concordance, you'll find that indeed the word for soul is psyche. So psychology and psychiatry are businesses that are essentially aimed at categorizing and profiling and various forms of judgment in terms of the logistics of the soul, which I would challenge any scientist at the moment, and maybe even the current Prime Minister, if he wants me to vote for his little shitty fag parade at the moment, to tell the Australian people what is meant in scientific terms by a soul. Tell me and the Aborigines what you mean by soul, Mr. Prime Minister, and or come and find me for not voting for you. Give Julia, give Miss Gillard back the fucking power. That wasn't directed at Miss Gillard. That was directed at the current Christian trying to run the country with Bronze Age morals. Anyway, so another reason I won't vote for the Christian Prime Minister candidates is, if they go to accounts of origins, you got Adam and Eve alone in a garden, and they are said to have given birth to two sons, Cain and Abel. And it's said that Cain kills his brother Abel. So that leaves us with three original humans: Adam, Eve, and Cain after Cain kills Abel. which meant that when the species had to procreate and multiply out after Adam and Eve with their son Cain, who'd killed his brother Abel, then the only female who was available for Cain to have sexual intercourse with and copulate with would have been his own mother, Eve. And this is another reason why I predict Queen Elizabeth II has no king or partner, because she's essentially telling you all that you all came from inbreeding, and it's holy. It's very holy if you've come from inbreeding. The inbreeding makes you holy, and it's yeah, so Queen Elizabeth is, I think she knows that she's disgusting. I just want her to take her face off our money. As soon as she gets that skank face off our fucking money, we'll have a better time, irrespective of our culture and skin color and things like that. Well, we're at 18 minutes. I'll put this on video 5. Human Rights Act free expression. If you're Human Rights Act free expression. What? Free expression. Hey, this is my neighbor Gus.
Hey.
Gus is quite philosophical and knows a lot about, we were talking about Greek Stoicism and its possible relevance today. What thoughts do you have on what key ideas and concepts from Stoicism do you think people could think more about?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the Stoics are basically the ones that gave birth to cognitive behavioral therapy. So basically, what some of the best concepts are, you can separate yourself from the event, so you don't actually have to react to the event. You can actually think about what's happened and how it's affecting you, and then react or act actually based on the reasoning of it, and take responsibility for your actions. There's nobody else that's doing the things that you're doing. You're the one who's doing it. I mean, you can blame that it's, say, for example, if you go and get drunk, that you're going to be, that's like, oh, I was
blame
drunk.
the alcohol.
Yeah, blame the alcohol. But, end of the day, it's you who actually drank the alcohol.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
My favorite, I love the quotes from Epictetus, and like it was roughly the same. I think it was over 2,000 years ago when the ancient Greeks ditched the gods and said that there are no gods and we reject the gods.
well,
It was Epictetus and Epicurus, people like that.
yeah, Epicurus.
So was this prior to Stoicism? Because I know this was prior to when when the Bible.
Epictetus was the
Bible.
He's a Stoic.
Okay.
He's like he's the one that actually wasn't him. It was one of his students that actually wrote all the things that Epictetus used to say in his lectures. And Epicurus was before him. He's like from the Epicurean philosophy school.
Yep.
And it is before the Bible. And
I love that. I love the ancient Greeks killing God before the Bible was even put together.
Yeah, for the Stoics, I think more or less the concept of God or the concept of the gods had to do with the ideals of human behavior.
So there was an uprising in ancient Greek culture where after they had rejected the gods, they started to philosophize more along the lines of individual independence and self-responsibility. And Stoicism is pretty much...
For them, the gods were, I would say, like archetypes to move towards or learn from than actual entities.
Than supernatural theistic beings.
Yeah. If they believed in a...
Or pharmaceutical company owners.
Yeah, if they believe in anything that could even approach the supernatural, is closer to what Spinoza sort of like brought up afterwards, like 1600, 1800 years later, which was there is a guiding principle to this universe, and the guiding principle to this universe is based on you can discern it through logic and reason because we belong to this universe. So it's sort of like a nature, what later on was called actually as a bit of a nature fallacy, but it's not a fallacy, it's more like a cyclical reasoning in that you belong to this universe and you are capable of discerning things, so you go from the assumption that you will be able to discern as much as possible using reason.
Yep.
There might be things that you find that are boundaries and limits to your knowledge, and that's when you use tools, and we've invented AI to actually get us further away from, be able to, in the same way that you can use a telescope to watch the stars, you can use AI to actually discern more about reason and about the reasons and rules of the universe, try to discern that. And that all started with the Stoics, so there you go.
There you go, people. That was Gus just talking about Stoics. If you find Stoicism interesting, I would recommend Googling Stoic or Stoicism. Stoicism. Is that right?
CISM, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time, Gus.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Take care.
All right. See you, fuckers. My recent concern, well, it's not a recent concern, it's a consideration at least, or it started out that way, that I've had more or less since the start or early on in the previous decade, is that if you are working for a private sector company, how are you to know to what extent, if any, are your basic rights being regarded or comprehended or ensured even by whoever owns and operates the private sector company. And basically I think anyone in that situation does have the right to wonder, well, what is it that the people who own the private sector company stand for, or what's their moral code? And if they have a moral code, how and in what ways is it commensurate with the ideas that helped produce the Human Rights Charter in its present form. Because essentially, if you have made an arrangement, an agreement to help assist the prosperity of any private sector company, and its owners more or less turn against you with some sort of issue that they aren't prepared to talk about to you and to your face, then it may well turn out to be indeed the case that they were thinking of ways to abscond the rights charter when they founded their private company. And if you know, that checks out because they get a lot of their revenue from repeated documentarial submissions for rebates in relation to medicines, for instance, from government agencies like the Human Rights Commission, for instance. Then yes, once again, it does seem, to my mind at least, to reinforce the prospect that these privatized owners of this private company in the private sector aren't exactly, dancing on a stage with women holding their tits out to celebrate the statutes of the Human Rights Charter. So what does that make them? Freemasons who love the fact that they have scientific qualifications from some uni in their 20s to 30s, who believe they know who's dangerous and who's not, or are they just getting their rocks off from absconding the rights charter every chance they get and in every way they can, because that's the way that their company has always done business and they don't know an alternative manner? Anyway, I'll leave it at that for now. I'm as shithouse boring as it is, I'm actually even having a gaze at the literature on the Freemasons. I've been non-theistic since my mid to early late teens, and now I think I should have been even more anti-theistic than I wanted to be back then, which is it's at least annoying in itself, that idea, because anyway, a non-theist isn't necessarily an anti-theist. It's until you've had one too many unjust clashes with the minds of too many dogmatic believers. Perhaps that's what it takes on a sociological level. But it's also about what's true and what logic suggests is most correct, relating to things like the species origins and moral awareness and the value of reason. And what is truth, and all of those sorts of questions. So, keep watching my show, and it's not my fault if you do drugs. Fuck off. Buy Gippsland Dairy, mango, passion fruit, twist yogurt from your local Capital Chemist. Working at the Capital Chemist warehouse is very interesting because you learn that all the speeches that they give about you should promote the less expensive brand is because when they buy bulk orders of generic brands of prescription drugs, they buy them in bulk and get a percentage discount on the bulk purchase. So there are debates, and sometimes the patients do report that they notice differences in the medication, So I came to favor cross-licensed generics because in those situations where it's the same, it is actually physically the same pill with the same scoring and the same marks on the tablet. So what some companies do is they know that there's the cheaper brand available, and that a lot of people will say, I want the cheaper brand. So the company that made the original brand also makes a generic to its own product, essentially. So they're called cross-licensed generics because it is physically the exact same fucking pill. So there's no way that, unless there's a batch corruption at the factory where they press the pills, there's no way that the medication will feel different. But when there are cheaper brands that come from other companies, sometimes patients would say that they react differently to them. But anyway, there's this great fiasco of promoting, you should be promoting these generic brands like it's the best thing in the world for all the patients. But if you work at the Capital Chemist warehouse, you do get to learn that it isn't so much about the patients getting what's therapeutically best for them at the best price, as so much as, you know, the company had said to the owners of Capital Chemist, well, if you order this amount per month, we'll give you this much of a discount, all these pens, and you can fly to Morocco on our dollar, and Gary and Roger can sniff cocaine off the butt cracks of Moroccan boys. I think 9 years of age. Anyway, so choose your medicine brands wisely.
Cash is a poor man's money. Cash is a poor man's money.
Hello viewers, remember, if people are casing you, they have neither the comprehensive knowledge or the qualifications to be casing you, you can definitely sue them, of course. Have eyes everywhere. So to follow on from that clip earlier today about generic brand pharmaceuticals, I would say if they ask you if you would like a generic, you should ask them back, is it a cross-licensed generic? And if they say no, then based on my experience in the industry, I would say it's probably the same, but I mean, the product would have passed the what they call the bioequivalence tests. But yeah, it's just, for me, in my experience, too many people have said that they notice differences, and now that I'm a bit sick, I will say too that with certain medications I've noticed occasionally I've noticed some differences too. So yeah, ask if is it a cross-licensed generic, then you know it's the exact same substance from the exact same production plant. Or you could go with the line that the owners of Capital Chemists will say, which is that medicines and prescription drugs are for fags and throwaways and the weak. Because they are the mighty Freemasons. Rah. Yeah, well. Thank you. Smoking causes spitting. Government health warning. Hi, this is my old pharmacy folder where someone pissed on the first training course module. I have a lot of concerns about who. I pissed on the dispensary module. Additional. It does take a lot of indecency, withstood indecency, before I start putting any sort of disses either on my Facebook account, Instagram account, or YouTube. Particularly as an adult. It's not like in high school where you're saying, you know, Principal Ellis roots cats. As an adult, it means you could, the people you are dissing, you would prefer to be in a courtroom surmising a list of charges. But if you can't do that, then you can, I suppose, make art in which you satirize them. I just truly do not think the concept of a monopolist. I think the stereotype to most people is they would be greedy people, or they would do anything for money. But what they are actually doing is they're kind of trying to expand into other schools of thought that they haven't even really studied. They just know a bit about secrecy because the Freemasons are known to be a secretive church. So they think they can do studies on people, and they're qualified by what? Because they held up a sword in a fucking Freemason ceremony. So now they know more than Jacques Lacan and they know everything about psychology. They don't. And because of it, people are going to psychiatric wards when really the Freemasons should just be getting sued, because they, at that point, they don't even tell you what their case is. So it's illegal, the case that they have on you. They keep that a secret too. So what the fuck else do these stupid Freemasons do? I wouldn't like to know what goes on in their churches. But yeah. Anyway, bye. Smoking causes spitting. Government health warning. Sponsored by Roger Toll and Capital Canvas. We know a lot about cause and effect.
Bye.